Good morning. So I wanted to share if you're working on your application, um, and you have to determine what day you are alleging that you became disabled and under the rules of the Social Security program that you're filing under. So Social Security Disability or SSI. A lot of times the automatic assumption is that you're going to pick the last day you ever went to work. And there's different reasons why they might not be so. And I want to get into one of the really important ones, because it can be that you could actually have an alleged onset date that is many months before the day you thought was the day you could assert it. Now, remember, when there's an alleged onset date, that does not mean it's an established onset date. So it's the one you're alleging. And in order for it to become the found fact of your case, you have to be found ultimately disabled. It's a great thing, big hurdle, but also it has to be where they decided that the evidence was sufficient as of the date you alleged to show that you did meet it at that time. So sometimes you can be disabled back then in reality, but you do not have all the criteria met for having the evidence to support it that is needed under the law to make that your established onset date. Okay, so if you, let's say you stopped working January 15th of 2023, and your gut instinct is to put that down. You were working full time until then. Well, what if it turns out that you hadn't been at that job very long? So the rule is, if you had been at that job for less than 6 months, and you left because of the disabilities, and the disabilities existed before you started that job, and there was a 30-day minimum gap between starting that job and the job you had before, you could feasibly, so let's say you stopped that job January 15th of 2023, you started it July 20th of 2022, you were at that job less than 6 months. So if prior to July 20th of 2022, you were not working for at least a month, 30 days, I want to say might be the exact amount, because of the same medical problems. So you had been off of work due to these problems, and then you, for a month or more than a month, and then you decided to try another job and see if you could manage it, and that failed due to your medical problems. And of course, what is due to will be decided by the SSA, and it will be dependent on whether your medical records support that you're continuing to have these great problems. That rose to the level of being unable to do any other job, and then you tried one, and indeed it didn't work. So you need to look at your prior work. If you hadn't been at a job prior to whatever date you're thinking you're going to file under, again, let's say it's at January 15 of 2023, and you've only been there 5.5 months before you have to that you get terminated or you have to resign. It might be that you haven't officially even cut ties, but you couldn't go back to work. So maybe you're working out those details. Maybe there's benefits to be had, FMLA, whatever. Doesn't matter. If you did not go back, so that from the time you started there to the time you have not gone back is less than 6 months, it might be what we call a failed work attempt, an unsuccessful work attempt. So it could be FWA or UWA, since we're all very acronym loving in this field. That is something you definitely want to put down when you apply. Changing it later can be a little tricky, because a lot of times you don't get a lot of attention when you communicate to the SSA you want to change an alleged onset date. If you take it to a judge, if it goes all the way to a judge because you're denied, they're more apt to entertain a request to amend onset. And oftentimes they do it at the hearing, when you ask at the hearing. However, if you're going to do that, I would suggest you send a letter saying you want to amend beforehand, like perhaps before that 5-day rule kicks in. The 5-day rule, when it comes to the hearings, just to remind you, is that your evidence has to be in, including any briefs or legal arguments, apparently, within no later than 5 business days before your hearing date. Now, 5 business days, keep in mind, obviously weekends don't count. And if a national holiday falls in there, you're really looking at what would be a 7 days if you're considering a weekend, like 7 actual days, or if there's a federal holiday in there, it would be 8 days. So I just suggest that people run with the 10-day rule instead of 5-day rule. Then you're always safe. Better to err on the side of caution and just run with that and always be a little ahead of the game at a minimum. So the alleged onset date can be much earlier than you thought. If you had one of these on again, off again work things in those last even few years, because a lot of times people keep trying to get a job they can stick to as they start to, their capacity to work diminishes. They try to do something easier, still doesn't work, doesn't last 6 months. So you can go back as long as there was a 30-day gap between working what is considered successful and your next work attempt that is not successful. So in theory, you can go back multiple jobs. Let's say you had 5.5 months and there was prior to that, there was 6 weeks where you weren't working. And before that 6 weeks, you were working someplace for 3 months. Before that, there was a 2-month gap. And again, if it's all because of these growing medical problems and you keep trying to go back to work like a good soldier, but it just doesn't work, you never have a successful attempt again, you can go back quite a while. And that's something you probably should do, even if your application date isn't going to allow you to necessarily get paid all the way back. Having that date there helps curb the weaker income from being calculated into your benefit amount later, should you prevail, if need be. And also it helps alleviate that waiting period for Medicare, because some of those months might be used up. The 5-month waiting period can be used up before now. So we can make the difference between having back benefits and not having back benefits, or having a significant amount of back benefits and not having a significant amount of back benefits. Okay. So alleged onset date, do a lot of thinking about, I would diagram it out almost like on a timeline. How many months you were at work? How many months were you not at work? Now we're going backwards in time. How many months were the job prior? How many months? And again, if someone's been working straight through and this is their first time being out of work due to disability, this isn't going to be an issue. But for everybody else, it can be huge. It can be a lot of money in your pocket that you would be entitled to because you paid for it. You've earned it. This is the insurance you bought. So why leave it on the table? Okay. Alleged onset date and the failed work attempt or the unsuccessful work attempt. That's what you want to look up, study up on. Okay. I hope it helps. If it helps one person, I will be very happy to have shared that with you this morning. And I'll catch you later. You know where to reach me. Bye.